Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. You bring us sources, research notes, and we boil it all down into the key things you need to know. Basically, getting you well informed quickly. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding what's really going on. Today, you've given us a really interesting CBS News investigation. It's from June 16th, 2025, entitled Cuts to FEMA's Storm Prep Program Hammer Communities That Voted for Trump.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack what's happening with these changes to a pretty significant federal program for disaster preparedness. We'll look at who's affected, why the administration says they made the changes, and, what the data actually shows. The article kicks off with this line: water doesn't care about your politics.
Oh.
And that's what we're diving into, how politics and, getting ready for storms are crossing paths in some frankly surprising ways. We're looking beyond just policy at the people and the money involved.
Yeah, and it's really crucial we understand programs like this one, BRIC, building resilient infrastructure in communities. Because these decisions, they don't just stay in Washington, they affect communities all over the country. It definitely makes you think critically about, government spending and keeping communities safe.
Okay, so let's start with the program itself. BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It was a big one, $4.6 billion, and actually launched under the first Trump administration. Its main goal was pretty clear: give federal money for infrastructure projects, specifically in places that get hit hard by storms.
And that kind of program is so important when you look at the bigger picture of disaster readiness. The source mentions research showing for every dollar you invest in mitigation, preventing damage, you can save up to $18 in recovery costs after a storm hits. It really highlights that difference, proactive versus reactive. And it makes you ask, what's the real cost down the line if we don't prepare properly?
Right. Now, the core of the CBS investigation: FEMA canceled the BRIC grant program, just stopped it. And it's not just stopping future money. They're apparently clawing back about $3.6 million that was already awarded but hadn't been spent yet. That goes back to the Treasury. So why? What did the administration and FEMA say? Well, a FEMA spokesperson, Undersecretary Noam, said they're ending non-mission critical programs. They even called BRIC wasteful and ineffective. They also claimed the program was more concerned with political agendas than helping Americans recover from natural disasters. And even, get this, more concerned with climate change than helping people hit by storms. Their line is they're committed to ensuring that Americans in crisis can get the help and resources they need.
Wow. That's some really strong language, calling a program started by the same party's previous administration wasteful and non-mission critical. It definitely frames the whole thing very starkly, doesn't it? And it makes you wonder, what are the deeper implications? Is this a major shift in how disaster management is being approached, prevention versus just response?
Yeah. And this is where the CBS analysis gets really interesting. Their investigation found that fully two-thirds of the counties losing this FEMA funding actually voted for President Trump in 2024. That pattern really stands out. Like in Florida, 18 out of 22 counties that were set to get almost $250 million in grants, they voted for Trump. Louisiana, a state that went heavily for Trump, had 34 grants canceled. That's $185 million gone. And North Carolina, too. Grants got pulled in places hammered by Hurricane Helene just last year.
And if you connect that back to the water doesn't care about politics idea, well, this data suggests something complicated is happening. It raises that question, like how do political leanings end up intersecting with something as basic as disaster preparedness?
Right.
And what happens when communities that voted for the party in power seem to be disproportionately affected by cuts like these? We're just reporting the findings here, but it's complex.
Let's make this concrete with some real stories from the report. Take Wade Evans. He's the mayor of central Louisiana, about 30,000 people just outside Baton Rouge. He's a Republican, a Trump supporter. His family actually had to evacuate by boat back in 2016. Flooding from torrential rain destroyed something like 60% of the buildings in town.
60%, that's huge.
Huge. He said it powerfully. Floodwater doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
That 2016 flood, they called it a 1,000-year flood. Just
Yeah.
unbelievable 24 inches of rain in 48 hours. Cut off roads, communications. It became the fourth most costly flood in U.S. history. And President Trump and Vice President Pence actually toured the damage back then. Evans felt like they had our backs.
Okay, so he felt supported then.
Exactly. So you can understand his frustration now. FEMA canceled a nearly $40 million grant for Central. It was for a new flood control system, 3 new basins to capture rainwater, really important for a place known for repetitive flood losses. Mayor Evans said, any person that flooded is shocked that it would be considered politics to do flood mitigation.
Yeah.
He saw it purely as a brilliant business decision for the long run, saving money down the road. And his quote really hits home: "It's time to put the bomb away and pull out the scalpel." Don't blow a program up that's very good. This is a very good program.
You can really hear the frustration there. A practical solution, seen as good business, suddenly gone.
Yeah. Then there's Conway, South Carolina, another county Trump won big in 2024. They've had terrible flooding from hurricanes 2015, 2016, 2018, one after another. They got a $2.1 million BRIC grant back in 2021. The plan was to turn some green space into a stormwater storage area, basically a controlled place for floodwater to go.
Another practical mitigation project.
Right. But they'd only finished about 75% of the first phase, the engineering, the planning. No actual construction had started when the money got pulled. The city administrator, Adam Emmerich, basically said they just don't have the money for big projects like this without federal help. And their spokesperson, June Wood, said, "We need that support so that our residents can continue to live in neighborhoods." You know, implies without it, maybe they can't.
So plans made, some work done, then suddenly nothing.
Exactly. And one more quick one. Pollocksville, North Carolina. Tiny place, less than 300 people. Also went heavily for Trump. They had a $1 million grant lined up. The goal was to elevate and flood-proof 6 commercial buildings on our main street. These buildings got wrecked by Hurricane Florence in 2018 and were just sitting vacant. This was about bringing Main Street back to life.
A revitalization effort.
Yeah. And the timing here is just, wow. The cancellation came 4 days before they were supposed to sign the construction contract.
Oh, that's rough.
The mayor, Jay Bender, put it plainly, "All we're trying to do is make our town a better place." And it just hurts when you've made plans and you're doing things the right way and the money or the grant stops.
You know, listening to these stories, Central, Conway, Pollocksville, what's striking is how similar the experience is, even though the places are different. It doesn't seem to matter what their politics are on the ground. They had plans, real needs, and they were counting on this federal support. It really brings it down to the human level, doesn't it? Beyond the policy debates, what are the actual day-to-day consequences for people in these vulnerable areas when funding like this disappears?
And it's not just mayors feeling this way. There's been significant political pushback. And interestingly, a lot of it from within the Republican Party. Senator Bill Cassidy, he's a Republican from Louisiana, was very vocal. He actually stood up on the Senate floor and said pretty forcefully, "We passed BRIC into law and provided funds for it. To do anything other than use that money to fund flood mitigation projects is to thwart the will of Congress."
That's a strong statement. Thwart the will of Congress.
Yeah. And he wasn't alone. He joined over 80 members of Congress bipartisan group in a letter to DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. They urged the administration to bring the program back, arguing that cutting it will only make it harder and more expensive for communities to recover from the next storm.
And that bipartisan aspect is really key, I think. It suggests there's a pretty broad agreement across party lines, at least among those closer to the ground, that this program was valuable, which, you know, directly contradicts the administration calling it wasteful.
Yeah.
It raises that bigger question about governance, doesn't it? When what Congress intended seems to clash with what the executive branch does. What does that mean for public trust, especially when you've got communities left hanging, projects half finished, waiting for help?
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's become pretty clear that looking into these BRIC program cuts reveals a lot more than you might think at first glance. We heard the administration's reasons calling it wasteful, not mission critical. But then we saw that surprising data from CBS News, the communities most impacted often supported the administration politically. And most importantly, we heard those stories from places like Central, Conway, Pollocksville, the real human impact, the financial hit. This is really about seeing what happens when big policy changes hit the ground locally, and how vital it is to look past the headlines to get the full story.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. How much does a community's ability to bounce back its resilience depend not just on its own efforts, but on knowing they can rely on consistent federal support they plan around? In a time when we're seeing more and more natural disasters, it really forces us to ask, what does effective long-term disaster preparation actually look like? And who ends up paying the price when those mitigation efforts get put on hold?
That's a really important question to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today, and thank you for bringing us the sources that got us digging into this.